everybody, to the Technicals podcast. This is a show all about interviewing people in different technical programming fields. Today, I am pleased to be joined by Ilya Radchenko. And so how about you just kind of intro a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello. It's good to be here. I'm a developer. I work at Team Gantt. You can see here. It's like a project management kind of company. We, along with some other kind of companies like Asana and Microsoft Projects, and there's other ones, Jira and Monday.com. So we're like in the same wheelhouse there. Otherwise, I started as a developer, I guess you could say. I went to school for a computer science degree, and so that was it was a journey of its own. We can get into that a little bit later, but I have 3 boys, lovely wife. Live in northern Michigan, so it's a good time up here, and love to do a lot of outdoor stuff. Been into gardening a little bit and do some cycling and stuff like that. So
Nice, fun. That's cool stuff. So, you kind of already alluded to it, but let's just get into it. How did you kind of start programming as from youngest years?
I've always been into like technical stuff, like taking things apart. I don't know, seeing how things work and stuff. And my parents always encouraged that, so that was kind of what like I wanted to do. And so initially, I actually wanted to do robotics, and so I went to a tech school instead of a traditional high school, and I was going to do robotics, but their program had changed because the instructor had just left, and so they had like a substitute, and so I did electronics instead, kind of like thinking like this will be like the next best thing. But unfortunately, my teacher was not a very good teacher, really. And so we spent a lot of time in class just like doing our own thing, like getting things done, I guess, that he assigned to us, but like doing our own thing because it's like a shop. So like you're doing electronics and for like 6 weeks, and then 6 weeks you're doing academics. And so at that time, my cousin, he was actually a developer already, and he was building some stuff on the side, and he built this app called Chatterfox. It was a web app, and it was like basically like chat in your browser, like real-time chat. It was like way ahead of its time. Like there was like nothing like that out there yet. And so like that kind of like inspired me. I was like, man, that sounds so cool. Like you can build stuff like this, and like just using words, right? Like you don't need any you need a computer and stuff, but like just whatever you think up, you can like create, right? Like so like that like inspired me, and like I was fooling around with like HTML and stuff in class. I think we would do like we would like replace the desktop with like a fake web page that you can click on, and so like fool like other students or fool the teacher. And so there's like fun little things back in the day, so like getting my feet wet with that. And then like down the road, I think I started learning some PHP maybe a little bit. I was really interested in like Ruby on Rails, so there's like a lot of they had a lot of like bootstrapped kind of stuff, so it's like you get started really fast, so you don't need to know like a bunch to get going, right? Like so that was really interesting for me. And so I did this little project for a friend who was working for a nonprofit at the time, and I built a small PHP app with like Google Maps in it or something, and like it was way at like first time building like something usable for somebody. And from that, I kind of forgot about it, and then I was like, so then I finished tech school, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? So I just decided that computer science makes sense, right? Like this is something I'm interested in. So, and I didn't decide to go to college like on my own. It was more like family pressure, right? Like I had my parents expected me to go, or they expected me to do something like that, right? And I would be like the first person in my family to go to college. So it was kind of like this high pressure kind of thing. And yeah, and so like I went, right, and I didn't do well. I didn't do very well at all.
Mm.
Like, so I went for 2 years, and after that, I'm like, I, I, I can't anymore, right? Like, I need to stop for now, and like, and so I did like odd jobs. I did some construction, some painting and stuff, roofing, and like did that for a couple years. And like one day, I'm just like working on the roof in the winter, shoveling snow off the roof, and I'm like, my hands are freezing, and I'm thinking like, man, like I should just go back and finish that degree. And so I went back and like um, Anna, my wife now, I had actually just gotten to know her at the time, and we weren't married or dating yet, but she like encouraged me
Mm.
to. She's like, yeah, you should totally do that. Um, and so like did that, finished. I think I like finished like a 3.8 or something like that. Um, and I mean, looking back, if I was going to do it again, I probably wouldn't do a computer science degree just because
Mm.
a lot of the things I learned in that education probably not as useful to me like in my day-to-day job. And like I mean it's hard to like it's easy to look back and say I wouldn't do it, right? Like that's so
Hmm.
so I mean that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's cool. And I'd love to see. There may not be any connection, but do you think that you had some good lessons that you learned from doing those few years of more like manual labor type stuff going into that? Do you think that that was kind of a valuable experience of working for yourself and having to do that kind of entrepreneurial thing?
Yeah, I mean it wasn't so much entrepreneurial, I guess. I did work for few people out of my church who had businesses. Like there was like this guy who had a
Hmm.
painting business and the guy had a roofing business, so it was entrepreneurial on their side. um, but it was totally, there's a lot of lessons in there, like I mean just working for somebody, having like somebody in authority over me, right? Like, and being like, okay, like I got to get stuff done. Like I'm responsible for these things that are assigned to me. And so like in that sense, there was a lot of good uh, learning, as well as like the entrepreneurial side, right? Like these men had these businesses, and they built these out, and like they could hire other Christians, or they could hire like young people they really want to invest in, right? And like, uh, so it's really cool, like along those lines. Yeah, and
Nice,
I
nice.
mean, it's I guess I wouldn't be where I am now without those experiences at the same time. Um, and like the fact that I did roofing, and now Team Gant actually came out of software that was built for a roofing company, which is interesting. So like that,
Hmm.
and there's like some tie back to like where I am now to like some of those things.
Nice, nice. Okay, so you're kind of at like you went to school, you had that degree. Maybe you kind of regretted it. I mean, I think this is a good place to go then. What would you rather have done? Like looking back, what do you think would have been the better decision after that?
Um, most likely, probably like a apprenticeship or like internship or something, right? Like, because
Mm.
like those first years, like I didn't have like a mortgage, I didn't have a car payment, I didn't have any of that stuff, right? Like I could experiment a little more. I could see what I really liked and like try things out. And like I mean, there's just not as much like pressure to like settle down and just okay, start earning money, right? Like it's more
Mm.
of like explorative and creative and like what do I really want to do kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So just kind of get out there, start getting your hands on stuff would have been a little bit better option. Get in those learning experiences. Nice. So, what did you do? So you did the 2 years, you finished off, got your bachelor's in computer science. Where did you go from there?
So yes, like school's finishing up, and I'm like, I mean, usually like when you're in college, they usually have like I don't know what you call them, not scouts, but like companies that come in and they're just like picking up fresh talent. Um,
Mhm.
and I think like nothing really stood out to me, but like I did apply to like some companies that were like coming into the school. And I started at this company that I think it was called CSC.
Hmm.
It's a very, very generic company. I think they had like, I think in the United States, I think they have over 90,000 like employees or something like that, like something crazy like that. Don't quote me on that. Like, I mean, I don't remember if that's the case or not, but something like that stands out to me like as something really crazy. But like, they're basically a consulting firm, like that's
Hmm.
hires out to like whoever needs it. Um, so I started there, and I was doing like Java, some database stuff. Eventually, they like outsourced me to Electric Boat, which is kind of, I don't know if that's the official name of the company, but they make submarines for the United States. Um, and so they make like two submarines or one submarine a year, like really big submarines that are like really involved. um, and so like I was part of that, and I was doing some research and development. So that was interesting. It definitely wasn't something that I was. The research and development part was really interesting. Like just doing like not so mundane, but like exploring more and like trying things out. Um, but like the fact that it wasn't kind of like web based stuff, it was more like I think we were using like Eclipse, like the foundation of Eclipse, because Eclipse is like an editor for programming, but it's also they also have like this thing where you can use that for other software. I guess you can build on top of it. And then so I was doing a lot of like R&D and trying out different like solutions. Basically, they wanted to optimize how many submarines they could build, right? In a year, and if they can get like just a little bit more, like right, one extra sub a year is just like I think this big win, and so they need to figure out like how can they. Um, so the interesting problem was like how do you know what part needs to be painted what based on other parts that it's touching, and like some of this painting stuff is like it has to be like anti-flammable or whatever, and so like you have to kind of like it's some kind of algorithm, right? Like that like breaks it down and um, does that. So that I was doing that, and that was interesting. But I was also getting paid like maybe like 40,000 a year. So like just coming out of school, you know. Um, so that was good. And then um, my friend contacts me, and it's the same friend that I had done the little job for, right? That little PHP and Google Maps app. And he's like, do you want we're hiring where I'm working, do you want to apply? And I'm like, yeah. So, and it was like the company's called AppGeo, which they recently got bought by a different company, so I don't know if they're still called that. um, but when I started there, like it was pretty much um, I didn't know that much about building web apps, right? um, like it's what I wanted to do, and it's kind of like what I dabbled in, and I've looked at like Ruby a little bit, maybe build some small things on the side, not like any working apps, nothing in public really. Um, which I mean, I would do that differently now, right? Like there's just so many more opportunities now, like GitHub and other things like that. But yeah, it was a good time, and basically learning on the job, right? Like I feel like most of the things that I know now I could attribute to that. I would call that like almost my first job, right? Like because like that's really what I wanted to do, like in that area, and like a lot of the things I learned. I mean, maybe I learned a few things from the first job, right? Like we did like some agile development there in the first, like with CSC, and then but like moving over to this to AppGeo is more of like small team, right? It was like and we did more work together. It was like two people usually on a project and stuff, and they did a lot of consulting. And so it would be like project after project after project. So like you're not working on the same thing. So there's a lot of different experience, different problems coming along, different things to do. So
Hmm. Yeah, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'd really love to kind of drive this home. How prepared were you at that job in the languages? Like, did you feel like you got in there and you're like, oh yeah, I know all of this stuff, I could do it, or did you feel like, okay, it really, really was going in there with very little experience and having to learn by necessity?
I think it was more of, yeah, like that latter, just jumping in and they were using .NET, which I'd never used.
Hmm.
They were obviously using more advanced like programming um, concepts, so it's more JavaScript based, a lot more um, I don't know, HTTP concepts which I wasn't familiar with, and really they're just learning on the job, like always Googling stuff, like Stack Overflow. Um, so it was, and like just like asking a lot of questions, always asking questions.
Hmm.
I think that's for me, and we were working like in an office. It wasn't remote at the time,
Hmm.
so like that really helped. Um, I think it would be a little bit harder for somebody starting out right now if they were doing remote and they kind of like starting out fresh like that and trying to do that and like asking the right questions, or because sometimes it's just harder, right? Like especially if you don't know, it's like how do you ask these questions like and get comfortable with people if you're not really there and you don't really know them, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah, and how does it kind of look like in the applying process going into a job where you really don't have much experience?
um I would say ask good questions first of all, like
Hmm.
don't like learn about the company, right? Like learn about what they're hiring for, learn about what they do, and just like, and actually as a person you need to like just be somebody who can learn, right?
Hmm.
And you have to place that forward, right? Like you have to show that you can learn. um and it's not so much about like degree necessarily, right? Because you can get into almost any industry without like the right credentials, right? Like if you
Hmm.
can show that you can learn, or if you have the skills already and you can show that you have those skills, right? Like people will hire you on the spot almost. um
Hmm.
like it's like the degree is really like something to weed out, like to filter through like a bunch of people. um but it really by itself, it's not right. It's not a really good signal of like competency, right? Like
Hmm.
you need to show like what you've done.
Hmm. Hmm. And what would you say is kind of the best way to do that?
I mean, obviously, do build things, right? Like so, like as a developer, build like projects. What are you interested other than development, right? Like, what do you bring to the table?
Hmm.
Like, what experiences do you have in your life that would, I don't know, like, is there a problem you want to solve, right? Like, maybe I play a guitar or something, right? And like, I want to like play the guitar and have it like show up on the screen, like what chords are being played, right? Like, and like
Hmm.
record it for me, like be like, oh, maybe I can build a quick app for that. Like I've learned a little bit of skills and about recording sound and stuff like that. So like do something, right? Like show something. And if it's just something generic, it's you're gonna people are gonna see that it's like very generic, right? Like that it's not a passion. So it's almost you have to combine like passion with what you're learning, right?
Hmm.
And like otherwise it's just not, you're not going to finish it most likely. um, there's not going to be that polish on it if you don't care about it. um, and so like, and like that shows a lot, right? Like that you finish something that you self-managed yourself to like start this thing, you had initiative to start it, but not only that, but you like continued working on it and you went all the way, right? Like
Hmm.
it's done.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that's a good point as far as you kind of have to prove and show that this is actually something that you love doing. It's something that you would be doing whether you have the job or not. I think that that's a big thing that people are looking for is someone who genuinely just enjoys doing it and is going to learn and do better because of that. But yeah, yeah. So kind of going from that job, working at that place, where did you kind of go from there? What was it like at that job and how did you get to next?
So yeah, from there, I actually, a friend that I had met at a developer conference, So I was doing some open source at the time. So I mean, that's also a way to get yourself out there, right? Like do some open source, which I mean, if you're not talking developer, I guess that you can do like volunteer somewhere, right? Like you do things that are like put you in the spotlight, kind of almost, or like put you out there that people are um, aware that you exist, right? That you're doing stuff. Um, and at the time, so I had met this person um, through the open source and through going to a couple conferences. Um, and he was working at a startup, and he invited me. He's like, "Come join us." And at the time, I'm like, "Looks interesting, but I mean, I kind of said yes, but no at the same time because I
Mm,
applied, right? But then my company actually, AppGeo that I was working on, they came back and they're like, they counter offered, right? They said,
mm,
we would like for you to stay with us. Um, and so I'm like, okay, I'll stay. But eventually, he asked me again. He's like, "Do you want to come and join us?"
mm.
And I'm like, "Okay, you're being persistent. Let's see what this is all about, right?" And I hadn't
Yeah.
worked at a startup before, um, and so like that was new to me and it was new to my family as well, right? Like I already had like
Mm,
I think I already had I had one boy already, and so um, things are a little bit different, right? Like compensation wise, maybe as well as like insurance and stuff like that. So that's one of the reasons I mentioned earlier. It's like you should totally, when you're younger and just starting out, like go like join a startup, do something like
mm,
riskier, right? It's a little harder later on, right? Like there's um, you're already comfortable or you have like payments you got to make and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, I did that and I joined, and this is the company was called Crash. So this is Isaac Morehouse and friends, um, and it was it was a very interesting time, lots of learning, right? Wearing many hats, learning about different concepts from Isaac, like forward tilt. It's like, right, put
mm,
yourself there, like forward, like, right, like that you're interested and like, I don't know, just like get it done kind of mentality, right? Like, not so
mm,
much grinding necessarily, where you're just like working, 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 and you're not resting. Like, there was still a good balance. I feel like that
mm,
Isaac was portraying. So, um, but like, I don't know, like doing hard things, right? Like how can you grow? How can you grow in what you're doing? And like at a startup, there's like so many hats, right? There's not as many people and there's limited funding and you gotta like pivot really fast. So lots of learning there. I mean, we pivoted multiple times. And I mean, in
mm,
the end, COVID happened and some other people had left before that. And then I was let go because I was like the extra developer and they were running out of runway. So there's
mm,
that. And I mean, there's learning in that as well, right? Like um, having that experience. And like, yeah, same thing. Looking back, it's like, I'm glad like that I had that experience. It was something that definitely grew me.
mm, mm. Yeah. And what was it kind of like working at that sort of startup? I mean, you said already you kind of wear a bunch of hats. How did schedule stuff for you change working in that? Because this is another, or were you working then remote versus on site for your last job?
I was working remote. So at AppGeo initially I was working on site. Eventually I did propose to do like half remote, half on site kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, and I did that for a little bit, and then like transitioned to fully remote. And I was like one of the first people to do that at that company because at
Hmm.
the time nobody was doing remote. Um, so that was new. Like I mean, so I was already like kind of into the remote world. Um, not so much. I guess AppGeo at the time didn't really have a good basis, I guess, for remote work. Like things would still
Hmm.
get done that I didn't know about, and then that probably should have been involved in, right? Like
Hmm.
if everybody's like on site and only some people are remote, and like you don't have like that culture yet, where everything's documented or the right people know about the thing that needs to be done or whatever, right? Like then things can fall through the cracks. And I mean, they were growing too in that area, so like just like I was growing in that area.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, you then were working remote to that. What was that transition still like from working? Was it a little bit less like scheduled and more corporate, and was a little bit more like freestyle?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we were at Crash a little more freestyle. I mean, if we had meetings, we I wouldn't say we had any regular meetings. I mean, we did,
Mm,
but like not most things weren't like pre-scheduled. Like it would be easy to just jump in and say like, okay, can I just talk to you right now? And like we just get on a call right away, right?
mm,
Um, and so we would always be in like Slack, hang out there, um, and I mean, it was there was a lot of collaboration, so like that was always interesting, as well as kind of like working um with like the owner, right, of the company, right? Like so like I don't feel like I had that same aspect at like my previous jobs, right? Like working with
mm,
somebody who's like in charge, right? And like you could see that they care about it just by like interacting with them. Um, so that was like a different dynamic as well.
mm, mm. Was it different in the fact of then getting to know him? Did you kind of take on that passion and care for the project as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it in the end, I was definitely like sad that like it didn't survive.
Mm,
Like even though I wasn't working there anymore, like I was still sad about it. Um, and yeah, totally. I mean, like it was a good time. And I wish I had survived, but like I mean, like I think Isaac would say like he learned a lot of things from that too. Um, I hope you'd say that, right?
mhm, mhm.
So.
Yeah, yeah. And what is the difference? Like, what do you think is the importance of working for something that you are genuinely passionate about and you care about the product and the mission?
I mean, it's just going to be obvious, right? Like, first of all, like the people, like the customers are going to know, right? Like they can tell because like not only are you like building really good quality things because you care, it's just like it's not just the bottom line, right? Like, it's not just to sell the startup or whatever or get like bought out or who knows, like that's not like the end goal, right? Like you have a vision, you want to do something, you make the world a better place, right? You want to move forward, um, and like provide value, provide services, right? That like help people.
Mm,
Um, so like if you do that, right, if you are focused in that way, um, it's like first of all the work comes easy, right? Like you're
mm,
able to do the work, and like sometimes it's even a struggle to stop working, right? Like so like you have to keep balanced. Um, just because like I mean like work is a thing that was given to us by God, right in the
mm,
beginning, right before even Adam and Eve sinned. Work
mhm.
was a blessing, and like it's obviously there's a curse now at work because of sin,
Yep.
um, but like most people don't realize it, and they use work as like an ends to a means to an end, right? They
Mhm.
want like that money at the end, and like they want to retire. But like even that, like that's like a warped view of work,
Mm,
because like work in itself is not only is it fulfilling, right? Like if you can do good work, um, but it's just like it brings people together, right? And you're changing the world, right? If you really think about it.
mm, mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, totally agree on that. I think that people really undervalue work and how important it is to have a true like purpose in it. I
Hmm.
think that that's, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, but I think that's why programming is really, really appealing to me, is
Hmm.
because I get to build something that can really add to society and humanity, and even to to glorify God in building that and making it, and
Hmm.
reflecting His image by being a creator of what He's given us.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Because I mean, like God is a creator, right? Like we're made in the image of God. So I mean, initially he gave us the garden, right? And he's like, take this garden and make the rest of the world like this garden, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
tend it, like keep it, like this is your job, right? And like we failed right in the beginning.
Yep.
And
Yep.
but like that command never went away, right? Like
Mm.
that command is still there. And we can't forget that, right? Like
Mm. Yeah. 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 And that's now we spend our lives trying to order things back, and that's where the curse does come in,
mhm.
where that it'll toil and the weeds will come up and there will be thorns and thistles and it'll be rough. The
Yeah.
We will only do it by the sweat of our brows, is what it says. But it's still
Yeah.
there's still a certain sense of how important it is to find true fulfillment in that
Mhm.
and having
Mhm.
a true purpose for that. But I think that that's something that a lot of people kind of miss. And taking those risks, like working for a startup or something like that, is a great way. It's like go and do what it is that you would truly like to do and what you feel called to do, something that you find true meaning in.
Yeah, yeah, and there's like, I mean, there's like the also like the faith aspect of like,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're just starting out, right? Like, let me just put myself forward, right? Like, do this thing. Like, I don't know if it's gonna work out, right? But like, I got to do something. You got to take initiative, right? You got to have that faith to take that step that even though you might not know what's gonna happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep. And that's just kind of that's what gets us to the best spots a lot of
Hmm.
times, is by just taking that leap and being like, you know what, I'm going all in. I don't know what's gonna happen, but I'm gonna try my hardest. So yeah, yeah, no, that's really great stuff. So from there, I mean, you said Crash, and we've had, if anybody's a regular listener, we had Chuck Grimmett on as well, and he worked on this project as well. So the story is the same, but Crash ended up shutting down. They shut down as a company, and it sounds like you were kind of in those last days of it as well. So where'd you kind of
Hmm.
go from there?
Yeah, from there, I was like, I mean, so it's I have like a day, like this is my last day on the job, right? Like, and I'm like, man, where am I gonna go? And I actually used our platform that we had, right? And I created videos of like
Mm,
basically sent out to a bunch of companies, like personalized videos and like uh, kind of like my resume or whatever, like proofs of work that I'd done. COVID
mm,
just hit, right? Like people are just like laying off everybody. Um, so, and then one of my coworkers from AppGeo is like, I noticed you're putting things out there. Would you like to come back and work for us again?
mm.
so, so I'm like, um, okay, right? Like, and at the time it was like my deadline was running out. Like, I'm not gonna have any work, right? And and it like happened like exactly like, I mean, God obviously was involved in orchestrating it. Um,
Mm,
but like, so like they actually the person who replaced me at AppGeo had left like the same week like that my position was ending, right?
mm,
As well as a project manager that was relatively new when I had left. So two people left, and there, and really, I was like the projects that they were working on are the projects that I really had the most familiarity with. And
mm.
so they're like, "Can you come and work with us?" I'm like, "Sure." Like, I mean, I wasn't expecting that, right? Like, I didn't know that would happen. And maybe I wasn't looking for something like that, but like that's what like the opportunity came back, right? And now like having used the things I learned from Crash, I was able to apply some of those concepts there as well. Um, so like it was a really interesting experience doing that, and I think, I mean, ultimately I didn't end up staying there, right? Like I think I
Mm,
worked like a couple 2 years or something, um, or a year and a half, something like that. Um, and I mean, it's hard sometimes for a company like AppGeo is very like it was very like services oriented, right? So they would do make
mm,
things, but then they'd also had like this product on the side, um, and the product wasn't their core focus, right? And so it was very hard for me because I wanted to focus on products, like I wanted
mm,
to improve something and keep putting I don't know, build that up, right? Make it like the best it could be. Um, but like with the focus of the company, the focus is more like how can we provide these services for like these different clients, right? Like finish it and move on to the next one, finish that one, move on to the next one, and like the client is decide like telling us what to do, right? And so that's completely different from like a product perspective. Like
Mm.
from a product perspective, yes, you listen to your users, but you also need to know from within, right? Like you have something to offer to the customers, right? Like, and you know some things that the customers don't know because you like they can't tell you necessarily, oh, it'd be better if it did this, like this, right? Like they don't know what's possible, first of all, like in
Mm.
programming and product design. Um, but like, so it's hard to go from like the like services oriented to like the product oriented mindset.
Mm.
And so like that was hard for them. And eventually uh, I had left. So yeah.
Mm. Mm. Okay, nice. And going from that, so you went full circle. You started at AppGeo and then went over there and then came back. Did that
hmm
for a little bit, and now is this where we come to present day, or is there some more in between?
Yeah. So, so that the funny thing is actually the person who initially got me into AppGeo, um, Ishmael, he um, he had left before I had left the first time.
Mm.
Right. He had left the company like after a few years that I was there, and he went to work for Team Gantt. Um,
Mm.
and so I'm yeah. So he basically approached me and is like, "Do you want to come and work for us?" um, so once again, right? Like I'm not out there looking for a job, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I would not recommend like jumping around from job to job necessarily, or like looking for another job as you're at the job you are just for, I don't know, just advancement or whatever, right? Like,
Mm.
um, and I don't feel like I did that, but like how things turned out, like it almost might almost feel that way sometimes, I guess. Um, but like it's like where you are, like how can you there should be an attitude of like um I'm here and this is where I am, right? Like put all of yourself forward, right? Like
Mm.
undo 100%. Like don't have like one foot in the door and like the other one's like looking for your next gig,
Mm.
right? Like so you're never gonna like grow. Like there's just like, and I know that it's a big trend actually, like in Silicon Valley or whatever, to like hop from job to job just to get more money and just to get
Mm.
higher, like up the chain, I guess you could say. So yeah, pretty much. And I interviewed. It was, I mean, interesting interview. Like just they had like a coding test, which would get on a call and just like code through some stuff along with some of the other devs that were on the call. It was interesting, just like talking to them through the problem and stuff like that, right? So it wasn't like I wouldn't say it's like a traditional interview, like um, one of the big companies like Facebook or whatever. But they did also have like a few steps, right? Like you'd have to go through just to like meet everybody and get like they get a feel for you, you get a feel for them. Um, it's like asking good questions, right? Like once again,
Mm.
asking questions, like thinking about like what do they do, where do they want to go, like I mean, what's their vision for the future, things like that, right? I think in the end, like, you are like you need to be almost vetting them, not them vetting you. Like when you interview,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Like, do you really want to work at that place, right? How
Mm.
much can you find out about them, right? Is there like, do your values line up, right? Um, and like in this case, our values lined up, right? And so
Mm.
I happily working here, really enjoying it. So.
Mm. Mm. Nice, nice. So, I mean, I don't really know about the company, and I'm guessing listeners may not either. So, what does Team Gantt kind of do?
So yeah, project management basically. That's the focus. Initially, is obviously Team Gantt. So
Mm.
the name symbolizes that we focus on Gantt charts. and basically want to make like the easiest Gantt chart for teams, right? Like it's in the name. So yeah, so then that's kind of, we have like a few other offerings on top of Gantt, like a Gantt chart. So like we have like boards and we have like list view, calendar view, whatever, right? Um, but like we're like focusing on, and we have like a unique pricing scheme too. We only charge for managers, right? And up front, that might seem like you're paying more in a way because it's like a higher price. But like when you really think about it, it ends up being lower for you since you're just paying for managers, not for every user. Um, and that, I mean, that lets us focus on like the right tier of people too, right? Like companies that have multiple managers, and so it's like more like a subset of company sizes that we're really focusing on, and like the kind of company. And I mean, we've been working a little bit with like construction industry too, just because like that's the roots of the company, coming out of the roofing industry a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it's a good time. Um, we love. I mean, I love working there. We have like a 4-day work week,
Mm.
so like that's a great time. And I mean, we get all this stuff done. You know, like Thursday's coming up, right? Like, get it all done, right? I mean, if it doesn't feel like there's pressure though, because like, right, if you love what you do, right, you're always on top of it. Um,
Mm.
and feel like maybe we get more done than some of these bigger companies that have like 1,000 employees, right? We have like 30 something people, or not even 30 something. I don't remember how many people we have.
Mm. Wow, wow.
So
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm always impressed by how the smaller teams, it almost seems like, can get more done because they are more passionate and they truly love what they do and they're more integrated and stuff like that. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I love like, and then another part that I'm really excited about is just like the company is like self-funded, right? We don't have any
Mm.
VC backing, so like we can be like, man, our users really need this, right? And we can focus on that.
Mm.
We don't have to like grow exponentially in how many people we hire, and so like in the end, right? Like we like the founders can decide like the trajectory of the company and where it goes, and like that just like resonates with me a lot as well.
Hmm. That's awesome, man. Yeah. So, kind of starting to wrap things up a little bit here. I'd love to touch more on this because I think it's a really fascinating part of your story and everything. But how does, I mean, we've really already touched on it because it really, you can't help but bring it out. But how does your faith and your Christianity kind of fit in with how you work and why you, even just why you program and all of that?
Hmm. Um, I mean, I think one like principle that I've been like that's been coming up more and more is just like it's not just about me, right?
Hmm.
Our culture, especially in the West, is like very individualistic, um, and it's like, what can I get out of this, right? Like that's what the folks like that has like. I mean, scripture is like very like it's not individually focused, right?
Hmm.
There obviously is like your personal faith, right? Like your salvation, like that's obviously individual, but like it really fast goes from individual to like family, right? Like
Hmm.
fathers are in charge of their family, right? And they're like uh the king and the priest and like of their family, right? Like, and so
Hmm.
there's responsibilities, right? Like right away. And then like from there it's like the church, right? Like it's just like there's more and more laid on top, right? And even like the Trinity, right? Like the Trinity is not, it's three in one, right? Like
Hmm.
there's not just one, it's one God but three persons. So it's like this concept, and it's like the same thing. It flows into like how you think about work, like working with other people, right? It's not about like just being um self-sufficient, first of all, right? Like there's a lot of
Hmm.
people going out and like moving into the woods and just doing stuff for themselves, right? Like being able to cook all their meals and from their garden, right? Like and like not have to depend on anybody, right? Like
mm,
that's completely not what the Bible teaches, right? Like
mhm.
we need to
Yep.
work with other people. We need to provide value, right? Like how can we bless one another, right? Like how do we grow for one another? Like if people can't see you, um, they can't like speak into your life, right? Like if you're just by yourself, you're like a lone ranger. Um,
Mm,
so they can't speak into your life. They can't like see like the sin that like that's just, that you've been like grow like you've been walking in for years, right? Like
mhm,
and like how can anybody know, right? Like if you're not with people, but like
mm,
and so like the family and the church are like they really have visibility into your spiritual life, right? Like and if you're not in either of those, right? Like or like maybe you're in a family but um you're not proactive, right?
mm,
Um you're not working with your kids, you're not um like whatever you're doing, like you're not talking about like scripture or faith or Jesus, right? Like why
mm,
does that like in the end like you basically seclude yourself, right? Like you're just this little
mm,
bubble.
mm,
So
mm. Yeah, yeah. No, totally agree on that. That's such a valuable thing of just not being so selfish and self-centered. That's our
mm,
society is so much that. Just serve yourself and you are the most important person, and that's not at all what scripture teaches. But I mean, going from that, you clearly have a very high view of family and investing in that as a husband and a father. How does that affect how you work and how you do all of your time like that?
yeah, I mean so I mean in a way I feel like I need to do so programming is very isolated, right? Like it's kind of hard to
Mm,
bring your kids to work programming,
mm-hmm,
right? It's hard to involve your family in it. Um, I mean, that's one of the things I love about like Team Gant. We do like um, every year we'll do a company meetup with the whole company, and then we'll have dev meetups throughout the year. But every other year we do a company meetup and their families, right?
mm,
So like I love that, right? Like bring in the families to know the coworkers, know the people that you're working with. So like that part is really cool. Like, and I feel like that's a step in the right direction, right? Um, but personally, for me as like as an individual, I've been and recently like just like branching out more, like learning more
mm,
skills, not just like development. So like um, I don't know, learning to I don't know do some woodworking or whatever, right? Gardening,
mm,
right? Like, but like so doing those things with my kids, right? Um, doing those things with my family and getting them involved. Um, and I think like being like so focused on programming, that's like kind of how where I've been the last I don't know 10 plus years, um, and like being focused on like open source and like I would spend a lot of like time like outside of work just doing open source stuff. Um,
mm,
looking back, I feel like probably not well spent that time. A lot of it, I
mm,
probably could have spent a lot less and focused on some more beneficial things. Especially like I don't know, being more with the kids, right? Like teaching more, like working together, right? Like how do you have those opportunities to talk about Christ if you don't do stuff
mm,
together, right? And it's not just like
mm,
watching them play, right? Like like that happens, right? Like you watch them play, but like get and do things together, right? Like play with them, right? Like or
mm,
have them join you in the workshop, right? And build some like birdhouses, right? Like something small,
mm,
right? Um, and it's like doing hard things, right? That comes back to that too. It's like you don't know how to do it, they don't know how to do it. Let's learn together, right?
mm,
And I mean, it's
mm,
almost like it comes back to you can do that with coding too, right?
mm,
Um, so like I can bring my son and start. We can start. Um, I don't know, like learning to code, like so. Um, and I'll probably be start doing more of that stuff coming up. Like he's 7 and he's
mm,
getting interested, and he's like, he'll play some games and be like, he'd be asking about mods, and he's like, "Can we
Mm.
build our own mod?" Right? Like, and I'm
Mm.
like, it's a little intense, right? Like, can we start simpler? So there's just like a lot of that, right? Like seeing those opportunities, right? Um, and just yeah, taking the time to invest. And like, it's not going to be easy, just because when you get your kids involved, things take like 3 times as long, right? Especially,
Yeah.
and like, it's not about just like doing special things for them, but like bring them into what you're doing, right?
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. No, great stuff. I totally agree on that. Bringing your kids into your work and trying to integrate them as much of your life as you possibly can. But so, kind of in closing, I like to ask this question as kind of the final question for people. But what advice would you give to somebody who wants to get into programming? They listen to it and they're like, this seems like a really cool field. I'd love to start, but I have no idea where to. I don't know what to do
Mm-hmm.
as like the first steps to start getting into the professional coding world. What would you recommend them?
I can kind of like what I mentioned before. Start with something that you're passionate about, right? Um, Build something there, right? Like even if nobody uses it, right, you will learn something, um, and you can definitely use that as like a proof of work for when you're applying somewhere. Um, I mean, obviously, like volunteer if you can, right, or like intern. Um, like those are great ways to do that. Um, Try many different things, right? Like um, you might think you like a certain thing, but once you start doing it every day, like it becomes pretty clear like that you might not like that, right? Like so like try a lot
Mm.
of things. Um and maybe like that program isn't for you, right? Like I've known people that were doing programming and they kind of left. It wasn't really their thing.
Mm.
Um and I've known people the opposite direction, like people coming from like financial industry or whatever and like jump into programming and just love it. Um so and at the same time like be willing to put yourself out there, right? Like be willing to fail, right? You need to learn to fail and fail well, right? So
Mm.
failure in itself, like go out there and build something, right? Like build it for somebody, like build an actual product. Like you can do that now, like it's just like so much easier than it used to be. um and just like build something and put all of yourself into it, right? And like if you fail, you will learn something, right? And like that's the
Mm.
only way you can learn to make better and better things, right? Like from like seeing the thing that you missed, right? Or like trying again, right? It's I mean it comes back to like that faith, right? It comes back to
Mm.
like taking that step forward. Um Even though you might not know like what's ahead, right? But like just like in scripture, like we're supposed to be sanctified, right? Like
Mm.
that happens through the different spheres in our lives, right? Like inner sanctification, right? Ruling yourself well, then like ruling your family well, and then ruling in the church well, right? Ruling in
Mm.
your town, right? Like it goes out, like right, these
Mm.
circles. Um, and if you don't have like that self rule figured out, right? Like
Mm.
how it's gonna be really hard to like do all the other spheres, right? You can't just skip steps like that. Um,
Mm.
and if you do, it's just gonna be difficult, right? And other people are gonna suffer. You're gonna suffer. Um,
Mm.
yeah. So just yeah, you just put yourself out there, do a lot of stuff, right? Like,
Mm.
I mean, but be focused at the same time, right? Like do one thing, right? Like do that
Mm.
well, finish it, or say it's time to let go of it, right? Like there's a time to let go of like if you see it's failing and like maybe you pivoted it twice or whatever, right? Like
Mm.
and you're like it's just not working, and it's like maybe it's time to let go, right?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, yeah,
Like so,
awesome. Well,
sometimes there's just like bullheadedness, right? Like we have that.
yeah, yeah. We just hold on to something and just won't let it go. Yep, yep. Well, awesome. Thanks so much for being on. I appreciate it. Really, really great stuff. Loved getting your perspective on everything. So
Yeah, it
yeah,
was nice meeting you, Luke.
Yeah, nice meeting you, getting the chance to talk and everything. So thanks everyone for listening. This is the end of the episode. Bye.